Snow drifts across the silent pines of Maple Hollow. A cabin stands alone, its windows glowing faintly against the storm. Then, a sound breaks the night. A faint knock. Outside, through the blizzard, a German shepherd collapses at the doorstep, bleeding, trembling, eyes full of desperate purpose. Inside, a man wakes, a soldier long lost to solitude. When he opens the door, their worlds collide.
Oh, God,
a broken
what happened?
warrior and a dying dog.
Easy.
Both carrying wounds
I'm gonna get you
that
inside
time
right
could not
now.
heal. He doesn't know it yet, but hidden beneath the dog's collar lies a secret powerful enough to change everything, and perhaps to save his soul. Where there is pain, God often hides a miracle. Stay with us, because what happens next will restore your faith in hope itself. The storm had come without warning, like so many things that changed Ethan Ward's life. One moment, the mountains around Cedar Peak had been sleeping beneath a calm, silvery dusk. The next, thunder rolled down the ridges like artillery, and snow fell sideways, devouring the forest trail that led to his cabin. Ethan stood by the window, a mug of black coffee steaming in his hand. He'd grown used to nights like this, nights when the world outside howled and the ghosts inside were louder still. His reflection stared back from the frosted glass. A man in his early 40s, eyes the color of storm clouds, his jaw shadowed with a few days' neglect. The face of someone who had once saved lives for a living and lost everything worth saving. He set the mug down, stirred the fire, and listened to the wind rattle the walls. There was something comforting about isolation. Its honesty. No one came this far into Cedar Peak during winter. That was the point. The silence kept the memories at bay. The screech of metal, the shatter of glass, and a child's voice that had called his name one last time before the world went white. Then, a sound cut through the storm, faint, desperate, impossible to ignore. A thud, then another, heavy, ragged, against the door. Ethan froze. Every instinct from a decade in combat returned like a switch flipped in his brain. He moved silently to the entryway, hand brushing the holster on his hip. No one should be here. No one. The third thud was softer. A whimper followed, a low, broken sound that didn't belong to a man. He unlatched the deadbolt and cracked the door open. The wind hit like a living thing, howling into the cabin and scattering embers from the hearth. Snow blasted across his face, but through it he saw movement. A dark mass slumped on the porch. "Jesus!" he murmured. It was a dog, a German shepherd, large and muscular, its fur matted with blood and melting snow. One amber eye blinked weakly up at him before rolling back. The animal's flank rose and fell shallowly, each breath a tremor of pain. Ethan dropped to his knees. The snow burned his skin through his jeans as he pressed a hand to the dog's chest. A faint pulse. Still alive. "You picked the wrong damn mountain to die on," he muttered, half to himself. Then, with a grunt, he hooked his arms beneath the animal's shoulders and dragged it inside. The door slammed shut behind them, cutting off the storm's roar like a curtain falling. He laid the dog before the fireplace. Heat spilled over them, softening the edge of the cold. The shepherd's fur glistened under the firelight, a strange mix of slate gray and white, a coat almost too beautiful to belong to a stray. Ethan's medic instincts kicked in automatically. His hands moved with calm efficiency as he retrieved the field kit from the footlocker by his bed. Scalpel, antiseptic, gauze. The familiarity of the process steadied him. "Let's see what's killing." "You," he said softly. The wound was clean, a single entry point just below the ribs. The blood thick, but not arterial, the kind of precision shot no hunter would take. Ethan cleaned it, then worked the bullet out with a pair of forceps. When it clinked into the metal tray, he frowned. A 9mm round, jacketed, fired from a suppressed weapon. Professional. Someone had tried to kill this dog. He wrapped the bandage snugly around the torso, his touch surprisingly gentle. The dog didn't resist. Its breath came easier now, the rise and fall steadier. "Who shot you, boy?" Ethan murmured. "And what were you running from?" As he checked for other injuries, his fingers brushed something hard beneath the thick nylon collar. He frowned, unbuckled it, and felt along the padding. There, a lump sewn under the lining. Using his knife, he cut a small slit and pulled out a tiny black object. A USB drive, ruggedized, military grade. Ethan turned it over in his hand. What the hell? The dog's head stirred. One amber eye cracked open. For a heartbeat, man and animal just stared at each other, the gaze steady, intelligent, almost pleading. You brought this here, Ethan said quietly. You came to me. The shepherd let out a low rumble, not quite a growl. Then it exhaled and sank into sleep. Ethan sat back, rubbing his temples. He hadn't seen another soul in 6 months. He hadn't wanted to. And now, out of nowhere, a wounded German shepherd was bleeding on his floor, with a secret in its collar that smelled of gunfire and trouble. Outside, the storm raged harder. Lightning flashed, illuminating the snow-thick windows like war photography. The smell of pine smoke filled the cabin. Ethan leaned back in the chair beside the fire, the USB drive resting on the table beside him. He tried to ignore it, tried to let fatigue pull him under, but his mind wouldn't stop spinning. The shot had been precise, the collar too expensive to belong to a stray. And this place, this cabin, was nearly impossible to reach by accident, which meant one thing. Someone had sent this dog to him. Sometime after midnight, a noise woke him. Not the storm, something subtler, a shift of weight on wood. Ethan's eyes snapped open, his hand closed over the pistol on the table. The fire had burned low, casting long orange shadows across the room. The sound came again, a scrape, then a soft thud. He turned toward it. The dog, Ash, he decided suddenly, without knowing why, was awake. Ash tried to stand. His muscles trembled, but he pushed through the pain and rose. For a moment he just stood there, swaying slightly, his bandaged torso rising and falling. Then he turned toward the door. "What is it, boy?" Ethan whispered. Ash looked back at him, eyes burning in the half-light. Then he let out a low whine, one filled not with pain, but with urgency. He pawed the door once, twice. Ethan frowned. "You want out? You're barely alive." The dog didn't move away. He just stared, unblinking, his chest heaving with shallow breaths. Ethan sighed, pulled on his jacket, and unlatched the door. The wind had calmed. The storm's rage had faded into a soft, constant snowfall that glowed faintly under the moon. The world outside was silent and silver, untouched. Ash stepped onto the porch, sniffed the air, then looked back at Ethan. The message was clear. "Follow me." "God help me," Ethan muttered, grabbing his flashlight and rifle. They moved through the snow in silence, the crunch of their steps the only sound in the night. The air was sharp, biting. Ash led confidently, his limp barely visible now, as if sheer purpose drove him onward. After half an hour of climbing, they reached a ridge overlooking the valley. From here, the forest stretched endlessly, dark pines swaying like ghosts under the moonlight. Ash stopped. He whined softly, nose pointed downslope toward a cluster of old ranger buildings, half buried in snow. Ethan's pulse quickened. The place had been abandoned for years. He'd passed it once during a summer hike, roofs sagging, windows shattered. "What do you think I'm supposed to find down there?" he murmured. Ash didn't answer. He only sat, his gaze locked on the valley below. His fur ruffled in the cold wind, the bandage stark white against the gray. Ethan stared at the dog for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, soldier. We'll check it out at dawn." They turned back toward the cabin, the faint glow of home flickering through the trees like a distant star. As they walked, Ethan felt the strangest thing, a flicker of warmth that had nothing to do with the fire waiting for them. It was purpose. For the first time in years, he wasn't just existing. He was moving towards something. When they reached the cabin, Ash curled by the fire, eyes half closed but alert. Ethan placed the USB drive on the mantel next to an old photograph, his wife Laura and their daughter Abby smiling on a summer day that felt like another lifetime. The snow tapped gently on the roof. Ethan stared at the photo, then at the dog, and whispered into the stillness, "If you brought me trouble, you picked the right man to find it." Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of something far away, a sound like the whir of propellers. Neither of them noticed. The storm had spent itself in the night, leaving the world hushed beneath a thin, crystalline dawn. Cedar Peak looked almost innocent again. Snow draped the pines in quiet perfection, and the air glowed with that pale light that comes only after chaos. But to Ethan Ward, peace had always been the most deceptive sound of all. He stirred from uneasy sleep, the remnants of the fire, a red whisper in the hearth. Beside it, the German shepherd lay curled on an old wool blanket, chest rising and falling with faint, steady rhythm. Ash, that was the name Ethan had given him because he looked like he'd walked straight out of a burned-down dream. Ethan stretched, his joints cracking like dry timber. The storm had left his cabin rimed in frost. He poured himself a mug of coffee, the bitter steam filling his lungs, grounding him in the moment. The last thing he wanted was to think about the black USB drive sitting on his desk like an accusation. He caught movement out of the corner of his eye. Ash was awake, his golden eyes alert, ears twitching toward the window. He rose stiffly and padded to the door, nose brushing the wood as if tracing a memory. "You still got somewhere to be, huh?" Ethan muttered. Ash turned his head slightly, the look in his eyes almost human. Ethan sighed. "All right, you lead, I'll follow. Just don't get us both killed." The snow crunched beneath his boots as he followed Ash into the wilderness. The air was razor sharp, each breath tasting like steel and pine. The forest, stripped of its fury, stood solemn and watching. Ash moved with uncanny precision, nose low, tail stiff, pacing with purpose. Ethan trailed a few paces behind, rifle slung across his shoulder, his steps measured but wary. He didn't believe in fate, but he knew the difference between chance and intention. And this dog was no accident. Half a mile down the ridge, they crossed what looked like tire tracks half buried in fresh snow. The rubber had cut deep, swerving erratically before vanishing downhill. Nearby, a smear of dark red stained the ice. Blood, days old. Ethan knelt, brushing the snow aside with a gloved hand. "Someone else made it out here before us." Ash barked softly as if to agree. Then he started forward again, deeper into the trees. They walked for nearly 2 hours, the silence between them thick and strange. Ethan found himself talking just to hear something human. "You know," he said, breath fogging in the air, "I used to have a shepherd, saved her from a roadside ditch back in '09. Smartest partner I ever had. She'd look at me the same way you do now, like she knew what I didn't want to admit." Ash flicked an ear, unbothered by sentiment. "Yeah," Ethan muttered, smiling faintly. "You're the quiet type, too." The trail grew steeper as they descended into a narrow valley. There, half swallowed by pines, stood a weathered ranger station, the kind built back when men still believed they could tame nature. The sign out front had long since faded, and a shutter hung from one hinge, clattering in the wind. Ash stopped, his muscles stiffened, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Ethan's pulse quickened. He drew his pistol, sweeping the area with practiced precision. "You smell something?" The dog didn't move, eyes fixed on the dark doorway. Ethan took a slow breath and approached. The steps creaked beneath his weight. He nudged the door open with the barrel of his gun. The air inside was heavy, musty, damp, carrying the scent of mildew and old smoke. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the boarded windows, striping the room with pale light. A few blankets were strewn in a corner, next to empty cans and a rusted thermos. Someone had been here recently. Ash moved first, padding into the main room, nose to the ground. "Clear?" Ethan whispered. The dog gave a single sharp bark, then a sound, soft, trembling, from the back room. Ethan turned toward it, weapon raised. "Who's there?" His voice cut through the silence like a blade. No answer, only the faint shuffle of movement. He advanced slowly, heart pounding in that steady soldier's rhythm. One beat for fear, one for focus. When he reached the doorway, he saw them. A woman crouched in the far corner, clutching a length of rusted metal in both hands. Her clothes were torn, her face pale and streaked with dirt. Behind her, a boy, no older than 8, pressed himself against the wall, wide-eyed and silent. "Don't come any closer," the woman gasped, her voice cracking. "I'll kill you if I have to." Ethan didn't lower his gun, but his tone softened. "You'd have done it already if that were true." The woman hesitated, trembling. The boy's fingers dug into her sleeve. "I'm not here to hurt you," Ethan said. "I followed the dog." At the mention of the dog, her eyes flicked to Ash. Recognition flashed across her face. Shock, disbelief, and something like hope. "Is that—" she whispered. Ash stepped forward, tail low but wagging faintly. He sniffed the air, then gave a soft, almost mournful whine. The woman dropped the metal bar with a clatter and fell to her knees. "Oh my God! You found him," she breathed, tears spilling down her cheeks. She reached out a trembling hand, and Ash pressed his head against her palm, closing his eyes. Ethan lowered his gun slowly. "You know this dog?" The woman nodded, swallowing hard. "His name's Ash. He belonged to my husband, Mark Donovan. He sent him to find you." The name hit Ethan like a shock of cold water. "Find me?" She looked up, eyes red but steady. "You're Ethan Ward, aren't you? He said if anything happened, the dog would know where to go. Said you were the only one he trusted." Ethan blinked. "Trusted? For what?" She took a shaky breath. "To finish what he started." They sat by the cold hearth while she spoke. Her name was Claire Donovan. Her husband, Mark, had been an investigative journalist for a Denver news outlet. 2 months ago, he'd uncovered evidence linking a powerful tech magnate, Victor Hales, to a human trafficking network masked beneath his company's global shipping routes. When Mark realized he'd been discovered, he encrypted all his files and hid them in a small USB drive, sewing it into Ash's collar. "If I don't make it," he told her, "the dog will find the medic, the one who saved my life overseas." Ethan's stomach turned. "Afghanistan," she nodded. "You pulled him out of a convoy ambush in Helmand. He never forgot." Ethan exhaled, staring into the dead fireplace. He remembered Mark's face, barely older than a kid, bleeding out under a desert sun. He remembered the promise he'd made to himself, never to lose another soldier under his care. Claire's voice trembled. "They came for us 3 nights ago, men with silencers. We ran into the mountains. Mark didn't make it." The silence that followed was unbearable. Even Ash lowered his head, as if mourning. The boy, Milo, hadn't spoken a word. His eyes, too old for their years, followed every movement Ethan made. Ethan turned to Claire. "You think they're still looking for you?" "I know they are," she said. "And if they find us, they'll kill you too." Before Ethan could answer, Ash stiffened. A deep growl rolled from his throat. "What is it, boy?" Ethan whispered. The dog moved to the broken window, nose twitching. A faint hum drifted through the air, a mechanical whirring that didn't belong to the forest. Ethan crossed the room and peered through the gap. High above the trees, a black shape glided against the pale sky, small, deliberate, scanning the valley. A drone. His jaw tightened. "They've found us," he said quietly. Claire's breath caught. "How?" "Because trouble doesn't forget names," Ethan murmured. He stepped away from the window and checked his pistol. "Pack what you need. We move before nightfall." Ash stood beside him, tail rigid, eyes burning like coals. The messenger had done his job. Now the storm was coming for them all. The drone disappeared as quickly as it came, vanishing into the clouds like a dark omen swallowed by the light. But the sound of it, faint, metallic, deliberate, lingered in Ethan Ward's chest long after the sky had gone still. By the time they returned to the cabin, the forest had changed. The storm had scoured it clean, every branch heavy with snow, every sound muffled as if the world itself were holding its breath. Ethan moved first, his rifle slung across his shoulder, scanning the tree line with a soldier's paranoia. Claire followed, clutching Milo's hand so tightly her knuckles blanched white. Ash led the way, ears twitching, tail stiff, a silent sentry guiding them through the wilderness. When the cabin finally came into view, a lonely shape crouched against the white. Ethan felt both relief and dread. This place had been his sanctuary for 6 years. Now it had become something else entirely. A fortress. A trap. Inside, he bolted the door, stoked the fire, and motioned for Claire to sit. "You're safe for now," he said quietly. She nodded, though her eyes betrayed the same truth that haunted his. Safety was a lie people told themselves until the shooting started. Milo sat cross-legged by the hearth, staring at Ash, his small hands resting on the dog's back. Ash didn't move, only turned his head slightly, as though keeping guard even while resting. Ethan watched them for a moment, boy and dog, two creatures bound by trauma, and felt something stir in his chest. Then he turned away and pulled the small black USB drive from his pocket. "Let's see what was worth dying for," he muttered. He set his old laptop on the table, a machine that had survived more dust storms and deployments than most men. It whirred to life, the glow of its screen illuminating the lines of exhaustion etched into his face. He inserted the USB. One folder appeared on the desktop, locked, encrypted access only. A dialog box popped up, requesting a passphrase. Ethan typed a few guesses, Mark's name, dates, coordinates, but each attempt ended the same way. Access denied. Military-grade encryption, he said grimly. He knew exactly what he was doing. Claire watched from across the table, arms wrapped around herself. Mark said it had to be that way. He told me if the drive fell into the wrong hands, it could destroy lives. Ethan glanced at her. Whose lives? She hesitated, then exhaled. Victor Hales, the founder of Hales Industries. You've probably seen his face, on magazine covers, charity events, speaking about humanitarian aid. But it's a front. His company's cargo network isn't moving supplies. It's moving people. Ethan leaned back, his jaw tightening. Trafficking. Yes, children, women, refugees, anyone desperate enough to disappear. Her voice trembled, but her eyes held steady. Mark found out the entire logistics software Hales built, the system the government uses for disaster relief, is rigged to reroute shipments and falsify manifests. He tried to go public. And they silenced him. Claire nodded, tears glimmering in the firelight. He told me if it came to that, the dog would find you. Said you were the only man he knew who didn't run from the hard things. Ethan looked away, jaw tightening. He overestimated me. Ash lifted his head at the sound of his voice, ears pricking, as if to disagree. They sat in silence for a while, the storm outside reduced to a soft whisper. The fire crackled gently, the sound both comforting and haunting. Ethan opened the bullet casing he'd taken from Ash's wound, turning it between his fingers. 9mm, suppressed. You don't hunt elk with this. Claire watched him carefully. You think it's military? He shook his head. Private, custom load. Whoever pulled the trigger knew what they were doing. He placed the shell down beside the USB, the two pieces of evidence gleaming like twin ghosts in the firelight. There's another name, Claire said softly. Mark mentioned him once before it happened. Said he was the one cleaning up Hales's messes. A man named Damon Ridge. Ethan froze. The name struck him like a blade drawn across an old scar. Say that again, he whispered. Damon Ridge. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floorboards. His pulse thundered in his ears. Claire startled. What is it? Do you know him? Ethan's gaze drifted to the window, where the snow fell slow and silent, hiding everything it touched. He's the one who killed my family. The words came out low, almost too soft to hear, but the tremor in them was unmistakable. Claire's lips parted, but no sound came. Milo looked up, eyes wide, sensing the shift in the air. Ethan turned back toward them, and for the first time, the calm soldier's mask cracked. 5 years ago, my wife and daughter died in a car crash. That's what the police called it, a collision on a rain-slicked highway. But the investigation report was wrong, too clean, too deliberate. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. A state trooper friend told me later, off the record, that one of the vehicles involved was driven by a professional. Precision turns, controlled impact. The guy disappeared afterward. No ID, no prints, just a call sign whispered through military channels. Ridge. He looked down at the floor, his voice tightening. Now, I know his first name. The silence that followed was heavy enough to drown in. Even the fire seemed dim. Claire whispered, You think Hales ordered it? Ethan nodded slowly. Mark gets too close to the truth. Hale sends his ghost to wipe the trail clean. But the problem is, he wiped mine too. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Claire leaned forward, her voice barely above a breath. Then we find him. We finish what Mark started. Ethan looked at her, the fear in her eyes burning alongside something stronger. Resolve. He envied it. He needed it. He reached for the laptop again. If I can't crack this encryption, I'll find someone who can. But before his fingers could touch the keys, Ash growled, low, deep, primal. Ethan's instincts fired instantly. He moved to the window, scanning the tree line through the gap in the shutters. At first, nothing. Just white silence. Then, movement. A flicker of dark shapes crossing the ridge. 3 of them, moving with precision, spreading out like wolves in formation. Company, Ethan muttered. Claire's face went pale. Already? They must have tracked the drone's feed, he said. They're not wasting time. He turned to her, voice sharp but calm. Take the boy, back room, lock the door. If you hear gunfire, stay down. She started to protest, but he cut her off with a look. A soldier's command, steady and absolute. She obeyed, ushering Milo into the bedroom. The door closed softly behind them. Ethan crouched by the fire, extinguished the flame, plunging the cabin into semi-darkness. Only the faint blue of dawn filtered through the cracks. Ash stood beside him, muscles coiled. Ethan loaded his pistol, checked the chamber, and whispered, Not tonight, Ridge, not again. Outside, the snow whispered with footsteps, soft, deliberate, closing in. Ethan positioned himself near the side window, the barrel of his gun glinting faintly. His heartbeat slowed, steady as a metronome. Every nerve, every instinct came alive again. Ash growled once, a low warning, then fell silent, crouched at his side. Through the glass, a shadow moved between trees, tall, careful, professional. Then another, circling wide. A third shape took position near the slope. They were methodical, tactical. This wasn't a search, it was a kill team. Ethan's grip tightened. His mind went cold and clear. He'd buried the soldier years ago, but tonight, the mountain would dig him up again. Suddenly, a sharp metallic click echoed outside, the unmistakable sound of a rifle safety being switched off. Ethan didn't wait. He fired first. The gun's roar shattered the quiet, echoing down the valley like thunder. One shadow dropped. The others dove for cover. Snow exploded against the window as return fire raked the walls. Wood splintered. Ash lunged forward, barking fiercely, forcing the men to hesitate, misfire. Ethan reloaded, fired again, controlled bursts, efficient and precise. Years of training burned through muscle memory. Through the chaos, he caught a glimpse of a face illuminated by muzzle flash, a scar along the jaw, eyes cold and familiar. Damon Ridge, alive, real, human. Their gazes met across the storm of bullets, and for an instant, time stilled. Ethan felt his heart slam against his ribs, not with fear, but with recognition. The man who had stolen his life now stood 30 yards away in the snow, calm as death itself. Then Ridge smiled, slow, mocking, and faded into the white, his men retreating behind him. The gunfire stopped. Silence rushed back in like a wave. Ethan stood in the wreckage of his cabin, smoke curling from his gun barrel, chest heaving. Ash limped toward him, one ear bleeding, but still alert. Ethan knelt, pressing a hand to the dog's fur. "You did good, soldier." Ash nudged his hand once, then sank beside him, trembling but alive. Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of a man's laughter, low, distant, and cruel. Ethan closed his eyes, that sound burning into his skull. He knew what it meant. This wasn't over, not even close. The night returned like a living thing, sharp, silent, waiting. The snow no longer fell. It hung in the air, suspended, as if the world itself refused to breathe. Ethan Ward sat by the broken window, the rifle heavy in his hands, staring into the darkness that pressed against the glass. The attack had stopped, but that silence was worse than gunfire. It meant the hunters were patient. It meant they weren't done. Ash lay beside him, ribs rising and falling shallowly, his right ear torn and matted with blood. Ethan had patched him up as best he could, whispering words he didn't realize he still remembered how to say. Words of comfort, of command, of loyalty. "Stay down, boy," he murmured. "You did your job." Ash blinked once, refusing to close his eyes. Behind them, Claire sat on the floor beside the bed, clutching Milo to her chest. The boy trembled soundlessly, his wide eyes locked on the shadows that flickered across the walls. Ethan could feel their fear, the quick, shallow rhythm of their breathing, the small noises of bodies trying not to exist. He turned to them. "They're not gone," he said. "They're regrouping." Claire's voice cracked. "How many?" "3, maybe 4 left," Ethan replied. "And 1 ghost." "Damon," she whispered. Ethan nodded slowly. "He's leading them." For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint crackle of embers and the wind moaning through the holes in the cabin walls. Then Ethan stood. "What are you doing?" Claire asked. "Turning this place into a fortress." He moved with purpose, quick, efficient, methodical. Years of military instinct bled through his movements. The calm before battle always had its own rhythm. The tightening of straps, the rattle of metal, the cold taste of resolve. He dragged the dining table across the floor and jammed it against the front door, bracing it with an iron bar. He checked the side windows, fastening boards over the shattered glass with long nails from the toolbox. The hammer's metallic ring was the heartbeat of a man returning to war. Claire helped where she could, gathering candles, extra ammunition, anything useful. Her hands shook, but she didn't falter. "You've done this before," she said quietly. Ethan gave a faint, humorless smile. "Too many times." In the back room, he found an old satellite phone buried under supplies, a relic from his time overseas. He powered it up. The signal was weak but alive. He dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, a gravelly voice answered. "Sheriff Barrett." "It's me," Ethan said. There was a pause. "Jesus, Ward, haven't heard that name in 6 years. I need your help. No time to explain. Coordinates, Cedar Peak North Ridge. If you get a text from me that says avalanche, bring your best men. No lights, no sirens." Barrett hesitated. "You in trouble?" Ethan's voice dropped to a low growl. "I'm in war." The line went dead. By the time he returned to the main room, the last traces of twilight had vanished. The world outside the windows had become a wall of black. He doused the lamps, leaving only the firelight's ghostly glow. Every shadow danced like a memory. Ash stood near the door now, his wounds bandaged, head low, ears twitching toward the unseen. Ethan crouched beside him and placed a steady hand on his neck. "You hear them?" The dog gave a soft rumble. Ethan nodded. "So do I." He loaded the rifle again, checked the pistol at his side, and set spare magazines along the sill. "Claire," he said, turning to her, "take Milo into the back room. Stay quiet. No matter what you hear, don't come out unless I call." Her lips parted in protest. "Ethan?" He met her gaze, steady and calm. "I've already buried 1 family because I hesitated. I'm not losing another." Something in his tone silenced her. She nodded, gathered her son, and slipped into the dark hallway. The latch clicked shut. Ethan and Ash were alone. Time stretched thin. Every second felt like the breath before thunder. Outside, the snow gave a soft crunch, then another. Ethan raised his rifle, eyes narrowing. Through the narrow slit between boards, he saw movement. A flash of black fabric against white. The enemy was closing in again, but slower this time, cautious. They'd learned from the first mistake. 1 shadow crawled toward the porch, another circled wide toward the woodshed. A 3rd disappeared around back. Ethan's heartbeat steadied. His finger rested on the trigger. He waited. Another sound, the faint metallic clink of a grenade pin being pulled. Ethan didn't think. He dove sideways, shouting, "Down!" The explosion tore through the front door, splintering wood and showering the room with smoke and flame. The concussion slammed him against the wall, ears ringing, lungs burning. Ash yelped, but stayed upright, moving toward the breach with a feral growl. Through the haze, figures emerged, 2 men in tactical black, rifles up, visors glinting red in the firelight. Ethan fired first. One dropped. The other rolled behind the overturned table, returning fire in sharp bursts that chewed through the cabin walls. Bullets hissed through the air, snapping beams, cracking glass. The smell of cordite filled the room. Ash lunged, teeth flashing. The second man barely turned before the dog hit him full force, knocking him backward into the fire. Sparks exploded, followed by a strangled scream. Ethan grabbed his sidearm, aimed, and fired once. The scream stopped. Smoke curled in thick ribbons. The flames danced higher. "Good boy," Ethan whispered. "Stay with me." Ash limped back to his side, panting, his fur streaked with soot. From the rear of the cabin came the sound of wood breaking, a window shattering, a door splintering. Ethan spun. A new silhouette stepped through the hallway, smoke, taller, broader, his movements deliberate. Damon Ridge. Even in the dim firelight, Ethan recognized that face, the sharp jaw, the thin scar tracing his cheek and the eyes. Cold, calm, calculating. Damon's voice was almost polite. "You've caused me a lot of trouble, Ward." Ethan's hand tightened around his rifle. "You took everything from me." The mercenary smirked, his tone dripping with arrogance. "You should have stayed dead inside that bottle. The world doesn't need men like you anymore." Ethan fired. Damon moved with terrifying speed, diving aside. The bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing fabric and flesh. But he didn't slow down. He rolled, drew his knife, and closed the distance. The 2 men collided like hammer and anvil, rifle, fist, elbow, knee. Every strike was desperate, efficient, brutal. They slammed into furniture, knocking embers into the air. The fight was silent, except for the wet impact of blows and the hiss of fire eating through old wood. Ethan caught Damon with a hard elbow to the jaw. Damon staggered, spat blood, and smiled. "You hit like a man who's still angry at God." "Maybe I am," Ethan growled and drove his fist into Damon's throat. The mercenary choked, then slammed his knife downward. Ethan twisted aside, the blade slicing his arm. He grunted, countered, grabbed Damon by the collar, and threw him through the shattered window into the snow outside. Damon hit the ground hard, rolled, and vanished into the dark woods. Ethan leaned against the frame, breathing hard. His arm bled freely. The cold bit into his skin. He aimed his gun at the tree line, but the forest was silent. He could have gone after him. He wanted to. But a sound stopped him, Milo's cry. He turned and ran back inside. In the back room, Claire was crouched over her son, holding him tight as smoke poured through the cracks. The fire had spread from the front, flames licking at the floorboards. Ethan grabbed a blanket, smothered the embers, and yanked open the window. "Out! Go!" Claire climbed through first, snow crunching under her boots. Ethan lifted Milo next, then vaulted out behind them. The cold hit like a slap. He looked back at the cabin, its roof glowing orange in the darkness. His home, his hiding place, was dying. Ash emerged beside him, limping, first smoking, but eyes bright. Ethan fell to his knees in the snow, panting. Claire turned to him, her voice breaking. "He'll come back, won't he?" Ethan nodded slowly, watching the flames rise. "Oh, he will. He's not the kind to lose." "Then what do we do?" He looked at her, at Milo, at the dog bleeding silently beside them. And for the first time since the night his family died, he felt something other than grief, purpose. "We finish this," he said. "We take Hales down. For Mark. For them." The fire roared. Behind him, sending a column of sparks spiraling into the dark. The forest swallowed the sound, holding its secrets close. Ethan stood, shoulders squared against the wind. His voice was calm, steady, certain. "The war came to Cedar Peak tonight, but it's not ending here." Ash gave a single bark, sharp and defiant, echoing through the valley like a promise. The fire had devoured the cabin before dawn, By the time the first light touched the peaks, nothing remained but smoke curling from blackened timbers, the ash melting into the snow like the memory of a bad dream. Ethan Ward stood at the edge of the ruins, the cold wind tugging at his torn jacket. His left arm was wrapped in a bloodied strip of flannel. Ash sat beside him, muzzle gray with soot, one paw still bandaged. Claire and Milo waited a few yards behind, their faces pale beneath the washed-out light of morning. Ethan looked down at what had been his home for 6 years. He didn't feel lost this time, only the quiet, grim relief of a man whose hiding place had finally burned away. There was no turning back now. He turned toward Claire. "We can't stay here. Ridge will regroup. Hales will send more men." She nodded, clutching Milo's hand. "Then where do we go?" Ethan's eyes shifted toward the horizon, where the forest fell away to the valley below. "I know a place. Old ranger station on the East Ridge, half buried, off the maps. We'll make it by nightfall if we keep moving." Claire hesitated. "And then what?" Ethan's voice was calm, measured. "Then we finish this." They moved through the wilderness in silence. The snow was knee-deep, and every step broke the stillness with a soft, deliberate crunch. Ash led the way, nose low, occasionally glancing back to make sure they followed. The dog's discipline impressed Ethan. Even injured, Ash moved with purpose, like he'd done this 1,000 times. By midday, they reached the frozen creek that cut through Cedar Peak's lower ridge. Ethan stopped there, motioning for a break. Claire sat with Milo beneath a fallen pine, while Ethan crouched by the ice, filling a canteen with meltwater. His breath curled like smoke in the frigid air. He glanced at Milo. The boy was tracing something in the snow with a stick. Tiny shapes, letters maybe. It took Ethan a moment to realize what he was drawing. A musical note, then another. Then a line connecting them. A melody. Ethan frowned. "What's he doing?" Claire followed his gaze and gave a small, bittersweet smile. "That's the song I used to sing to him at night. It's Mark's song." Ethan tilted his head. "Mark's?" She nodded slowly. "When Mark sent Ash away, he told me one last thing. He said, 'If it ever comes to it, remember Sarah's lullaby.'" The name hit Ethan like a jolt. Sarah, his wife's name. He froze. "Say that again." Claire blinked. "Sarah's lullaby. Why?" Ethan's pulse quickened. He stood abruptly, snow scattering from his boots. "The encryption." She stared at him, confused. "What encryption?" "The drive," he said, already pulling the USB from his coat pocket. He said it needed a passphrase. Maybe it's not a word. Maybe it's a song. They reached the ranger station before dusk. It was small, half collapsed, but the concrete foundation still held. The place smelled of rust and forgotten years. Ethan kicked open the door, cleared the snow, and lit a lantern he found inside. The weak light flickered against the walls, revealing an old radio console, dusty maps, and a battered generator in the corner. Ash sniffed every shadow, then settled near the door like a sentinel. Ethan placed the laptop on the desk, the USB drive glinting faintly in his hand. Claire and Milo stood close behind, their faces drawn but curious. He inserted the drive. The same encrypted prompt appeared. "Enter passcode." He hesitated, then typed, "Sarah." "Lullaby." "Access denied." He tried again. "Lullaby." "For Sarah access denied." He leaned back as frustrated. "Damn it." Claire frowned, eyes distant. "Maybe it's not the words. Maybe it's the melody." Ethan blinked. "The melody?" She nodded toward Milo. "He remembers it better than I do." Milo looked up, startled. Ethan crouched beside him. "Hey, kid, can you hum it for me?" The boy hesitated, then shyly nodded. He took a deep breath and began. A soft, trembling hum that barely rose above the wind outside. It was simple, haunting. A lullaby only a father could have written. 4 notes descending like falling snow. Then a pause, then 2, that lifted again toward hope. As he listened, Ethan's throat tightened. He remembered holding Sarah's hand in a hospital bed, humming the same tune to their daughter Abby before she fell asleep. When the last note faded, Ethan typed the letters that matched the rhythm. CAEDAR. Enter. The screen flickered. Then, suddenly, access granted. A folder opened. Inside were hundreds of files, financial ledgers, shipment logs, offshore bank transfers. Ethan clicked on one marked Project Halo. Video footage filled the screen. Victor Hales stood in a pristine boardroom, his smile smooth and rehearsed. Behind him, satellite maps displayed shipping routes across the Pacific. A voice, unseen, cold, spoke off camera. "You're moving them through the aid shipments?" Hales's smile didn't falter. "I prefer the term reallocation of resources. The less they are seen, the more value they hold." Claire covered her mouth, her eyes flooding with tears. Then another file loaded automatically, time-stamped 3 weeks earlier. A dimly lit warehouse, snow slanting through an open door. Mark Donovan stood on camera, breath clouding the air. His voice shook. "If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. Victor Hales isn't who you think he is. His partner, the man who cleans up his messes, is Damon Ridge. They've used veterans as couriers, border patrols as shields, police contracts as cover. I have everything here. But once this goes live, they'll burn the world to stop it." He looked straight into the camera, his voice steadied. "Ethan, if this reaches you, I trust you'll finish what I started." Then gunfire. The screen went black. Claire sobbed quietly, pressing a hand to her mouth. Ethan's hands shook as he closed the laptop. "Now we know," he said softly. But Ash growled again. Low, deep, warning. Ethan tensed. Not again. He killed the lantern. The cabin fell into darkness, lit only by the dim blue glow of the laptop. Through the cracked window, a faint red light blinked in the trees. Infrared. "They found us," Claire whispered. Ethan nodded grimly. "Not yet, but they will." He looked around the room, his mind racing. He needed time to transmit the data, get it to Barrett before Ridge closed in. He pulled the satellite phone from his pocket and plugged it into the laptop. Come on, come on!" The screen displayed signal weak, transmission pending. Outside, the snow creaked. Someone was moving through it. Ash growled louder. His hackles rose, breath misting in the cold air. Claire clutched Milo. "Ethan! Stay down!" he hissed. Through the narrow crack of the doorway, he saw them, two shadows creeping closer, rifles glinting in the pale light. He whispered to Ash, "Flank right. Wait for my mark." The dog slipped into the darkness, silent as breath. Ethan waited until the first man's boot hit the porch. Then he fired. The shot cracked the silence. Snow exploded. The first intruder fell. The second bolted left, but Ash hit him from the side, dragging him down in a blur of motion and fury. The man screamed once before the forest swallowed the sound. Ethan reloaded, heart pounding, eyes scanning the trees. But there was no sign of Damon. Then, from the ridge above, a voice called through the wind. "Still breathing, Ward?" Ethan's blood turned to ice. "Ridge!" The reply came like a ghost's whisper. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Hand over the drive. Walk away." Ethan looked down at the laptop, still uploading data. 10%. He raised his gun. "Come and take it." The woods erupted in gunfire. Bullets tore through the ranger station, shredding walls, splintering beams. Snow fell from the ceiling in ghostly clouds. Ethan fired back, methodical, moving between cover. Ash darted in and out of the doorway, forcing the shooters to scatter. Claire shielded Milo behind an overturned desk, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes blazing with defiance. Outside, Ridge's voice echoed again, calm and infuriatingly confident. "You think you're fighting for justice, Ward, but this world doesn't want heroes anymore, just survivors." Ethan shouted back, "Then I guess you'll die as neither." The transmission bar ticked upward, 70%, 80. A bullet smashed through the lantern, plunging them into darkness. 90. A red laser line crept across the wall, landing square on Ethan's chest. Ridge was close. Ash saw it first. The dog lunged, knocking. Ethan sideways as a suppressed shot shattered the glass behind him. The bullet tore through the air where Ethan's heart had been a second before. Ash! Ethan shouted. The shepherd yelped, skidding across the floor, but still moved, dragging himself toward the sound of the shooter. The upload hit 100%. Ethan grabbed the laptop, yanked the drive free, and tossed the satellite phone toward the snow outside. "Barrett'll trace it," he muttered. Then he turned toward the trees, voice raw. "Ridge, you wanted me. Come finish it." The forest swallowed his words. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, footsteps, slow, steady, coming closer. Ethan raised his rifle. Snow swirled around him like smoke. The final confrontation was coming. The storm was over, but the mountain still held its breath. Snow whispered through the trees, and the world lay bathed in that ghostly blue light that comes just before sunrise, the hour when night refuses to die, and the living hold their ground between memory and redemption. Ethan Ward stood alone in the clearing before the ranger station, breath turning to vapor in the frozen air. His rifle was low but ready, eyes scanning the forest, where the sound of boots echoed faintly through the snow. Ash crouched beside him, bleeding, panting, but unbroken. Each exhale left a small cloud of steam that vanished as quickly as it formed. Somewhere in the tree line, Damon Ridge was watching. "You're predictable, Ward," came that smooth, sardonic voice. "Always running toward the fire, never away from it." Ethan pivoted toward the sound. "You've been running from the truth for too long." A shadow detached itself from the trees, broad shoulders, a rifle slung lazily at his side. Ridge stepped into view, his face carved from cold light, one shoulder still wrapped where Ethan's bullet had torn through him earlier. He smiled, slow and mocking. "You sent your proof to Barrett, didn't you?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Every file, every name." Ridge nodded, unfazed. "Hales will burn it all before breakfast. You think one small-town sheriff can take down a man who owns half of Congress?" Ethan leveled the rifle. "No, but I think one good man can start the fire." The mercenary's smile faded. "You should have died with them, Ethan. And you should have stayed buried in the desert," Ethan replied. Then the world broke open. The first shot shattered the silence, kicking up a spray of snow inches from Ethan's boots. He dove behind a fallen log, firing back in short, controlled bursts. The air filled with gunfire, sharp, surgical, a duet of violence echoing through the pines. Ash lunged into the tree line, cutting wide. Ridge tracked the movement, firing twice, missing both times. The shepherd vanished into the white, a phantom of fur and fury. Ethan shifted position, rolling to a new angle, squeezing off a round that splintered bark near Ridge's head. The mercenary ducked, returned fire, then advanced, steps steady and deliberate. "You never understood, Ward," Ridge shouted. "We're the same. They built us for war, then threw us away. The only difference is I made peace with it." Ethan's voice came low and fierce. "You made profit from it." He fired again, hit Ridge's thigh. The man grunted, stumbled, but kept moving, his grin bloodied now. "Still not enough," he hissed, pulling a combat knife from his vest. Ethan dropped the empty rifle and drew his own blade. They circled each other in the snow, breath coming hard and fast, two men carved by the same machine, finally standing where it all began and all would end. Ridge lunged first, knife flashing. Ethan parried, steel clashing, sparks flying against the frozen air. Ridge's strength was brutal. Ethan's precision was colder. They moved like dancers locked in a fatal rhythm, each strike heavier than the last. Ridge slammed into him, driving the blade toward Ethan's chest. Ethan twisted, forcing the knife away, but the mercenary's elbow cracked into his jaw, stars bursting behind his eyes. He stumbled backward, fell to one knee. Ridge raised the knife high, ready to finish it. Then Ash came out of the trees like a bullet. The shepherd hit Ridge square in the back, teeth sinking deep into the wounded shoulder. Ridge roared, staggering sideways, trying to shake the dog off. Ethan surged to his feet, driving his knife into Ridge's forearm. The blade clattered into the snow. The mercenary swung wildly, backhanding Ethan across the face, but Ash refused to let go. With a final growl, the dog tore free and leapt back, crouched low, teeth bared. Ridge staggered, breathing hard. "You should have stayed in your hole, soldier." Ethan wiped the blood from his lip, his voice steady. "And you should have stayed dead." He drew his sidearm, one last bullet chambered. Ridge charged. The gunshot cracked like thunder. Ridge stopped mid-stride. A dark stain bloomed across his chest. His eyes flickered, disbelief giving way to something almost human. Regret, maybe, or recognition. He sank to his knees, snow turning crimson beneath him. "You don't win," he rasped. Ethan stepped closer, staring down at him. "I wasn't trying to." Ridge's eyes went glassy. His body fell forward, face first into the snow. The forest swallowed the sound. Ethan lowered his weapon, chest heaving. The cold wind rushed through the trees like a sigh. The mountain itself exhaling at last. He turned to find Claire and Milo standing in the doorway of the ranger station. The boy clutched his mother's coat, eyes wide. Claire's face was pale, but her voice was steady. "It's over?" Ethan nodded slowly. "It's over." Ash limped to his side, pressing his head against Ethan's hand. The man knelt, fingers brushing the shepherd's fur. "You did good, boy. You brought us home." Above them, the horizon began to glow, first faint gold, then a deep, forgiving pink. The first sunrise in days. Ethan watched it rise over Cedar Peak, the light spilling across the snow, melting away the night. For the first time in years, he let himself breathe without counting the ghosts. Claire stepped beside him. "Barrett called," she said softly. "He got the files. Hales is being arrested right now. The story's breaking everywhere." Ethan turned, searching her eyes. "You're sure?" She nodded, tears glimmering in the morning light. "You did it." He shook his head. "We did it." Milo moved forward then, small, hesitant, and wrapped his arms around Ethan's waist. It was the first time the boy had touched him, the first time he'd looked at him without fear. "Thank you," Milo whispered. Ethan froze, heart hammering. The boy had spoken, for the first time since his father's death. He swallowed hard, placing a hand on the child's shoulder. "You're welcome, kid." Ash barked once, tail wagging weakly, as if to punctuate the moment. The sound carried up the ridge, over the trees, echoing into the valley below like the voice of something ancient and forgiving. Hours later, they buried Ridge in the snow, unmarked, unnamed. Ethan said nothing over the grave, no prayer, no curse, just silence. Claire watched him, then asked softly, "What happens now?" Ethan looked out over the mountains. "Now, we live." She smiled faintly. "You don't believe in peace." He returned the smile, weary but real. "Didn't. Maybe I'm learning." Milo threw a handful of snow into the wind. "Dad said the mountain keeps secrets," he whispered. Ethan nodded. "Maybe, but today it gave a few back." They turned toward the trail leading down the ridge. The smoke from the burned cabin had vanished, replaced by sunlight breaking through the clouds. As they walked, Ash limped close beside Ethan, brushing against his leg with quiet loyalty. Ethan glanced down, whispering, "Let's go home, partner." For the first time in years, he knew what that word meant. 1 year later, spring came late to Cedar Peak. The snow retreated slowly, revealing the first threads of green beneath the thaw. At the edge of the rebuilt cabin, Ethan stood on the porch, coffee steaming in his hand. Claire was inside, reading with Milo by the fire. The boy laughed, a sound that filled the air like something sacred. Ash lay sprawled in the sunlight, fur glossy again, tail flicking lazily. A pickup truck pulled up the trail. Sheriff Barrett stepped out, hat tilted against the wind. "You clean up nice, Ward," he said, grinning. "Town's been talking. They're thinking of making you deputy again." Ethan chuckled. "I think I'll stick to woodwork." Barrett sipped from his thermos. "You know, they called it the Cedar Peak Files on the news. Hale's got life. The feds cleaned house." Ethan nodded, gaze drifting toward the mountains. "Then it was worth it." The sheriff studied him for a long moment. "You ever think God gave you that dog for a reason?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Every day." Barrett tipped his hat, climbed back into his truck, and drove off, leaving tire tracks curling through the mud. Ethan turned back toward the cabin. Claire waved from the porch, sunlight caught in her hair. Milo ran out, snow melting under his bare feet, laughing. Ash barked, chasing after him, the two of them circling the yard in joyous chaos. Ethan watched them, this strange, broken, beautiful family, and felt something inside him finally, quietly, heal. He lifted his face to the sky and whispered, "Thank you." The wind carried the words up the mountain, soft and clear, and for the first time in a long time, Cedar Peak was silent. Not because it was empty, but because it was at peace. Sometimes God's miracles do not arrive with thunder or angels. Sometimes they come quietly, through a wounded dog who refuses to give up, or a broken man who dares to love again. In every act of kindness, in every second chance, His light appears, reminding us that even the coldest winter cannot stop a heart that believes. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a sign of hope today. Leave a comment to bless others with your words, and subscribe to hear more stories of faith, love, and redemption. May God's grace protect you and your family always. Type Amen in the comments if you believe miracles still walk among us.